Today we're going to begin a three-part series on making a color RA4 print in the darkroom. This is part 1. We're going to look at tools and materials that you'll need to do this. Part 2 will look at techniques of basics of printing RA4. And part 3 will look at some more advanced techniques.
Welcome to the Naked Photographer, where I'll be exposing myself. No, I won't. That sounded better in my head.
So if you're going to begin printing color in the darkroom, you're going to need to get some stuff put together to do it. First off, you're going to need a color negative. This is not a color positive. That would be like a slide for a projector. Then you're also going to need some colored paper. There are 2 manufacturers out there currently of colored paper that I can find. There is Fuji and there is Kodak. Now, Fuji currently is the only company making paper cut in sheets. Kodak only has it available in rolls. So if you decide to get Kodak, you would need to have some means of cutting rolls down. That could be as simple as a pair of scissors, a Rotary-Type paper cutter. Maybe you want a more advanced machine like what I've got that dispenses and cuts it for you. Whatever you need, you can use the Kodak or the Fuji. There is virtually no difference between them in terms of use. There is a slight difference in color palette and contrast, but unless you put them side by side, you probably wouldn't notice. And there is no issue on using a Kodak negative on Fuji paper, Fuji negative on Kodak paper, or other way around. Doesn't matter. So don't feel like you have to stay brand specific. Next, once you have those 2 things, you're going to need an enlarger. Now, I am using a color head. That means it has dials specifically to adjust the amount of cyan, magenta, and yellow. And we're going to use those to control the balance of color within the print. So we will have to adjust as we go. Now I will tell you, cyan typically is not used, because if you use cyan, magenta, and yellow all together, rather than changing your red and cyan color balance, it acts as neutral density when combined with the other 2 controls. So instead, we're going to use the yellow and magenta only, and then to control the cyan to red, we'll use yellow and magenta together. If you don't have a color head, that is okay. You can still print color. You just have to get a separate color printing filter set. I'll tell you, it is not the Ilford black and white set. Even though they do have yellow and magenta colors in there, they are not meant for color printing. You will not get good results. Instead, you will want to get a color printing set. So Freestyle has 2 sizes available in their Arista brand. So I'll put a link to that in the description of the video down below. Kodak has some older color printing filters, gel filters. Do not get that mixed up with their CC color correction or color compensating filters. Those are a completely different animal and will not produce the results that you anticipate. Because of the age of the Kodak filters, I'd recommend just go ahead and get a brand new set of Arista if you don't have a color head to work with. Once you have the enlarger, then you're going to need a means of processing your print. We will come back to that in a few minutes. First, let's jump ahead to the end of the process, because we have a few different options for processing, so we'll cover that separately. So once you're done printing, then you'll need to find a way to evaluate your print. With color, the color of the light will influence the color balance of your print. So it's recommended to use a daylight balanced light. I am going to be using a graphic light fluorescent bulb system because I've already got one, so I'm just going to use that. But a Solux bulb of whichever color temperature you choose would also be a good choice because it has a little bit higher CRI than a standard halogen bulb or tungsten bulb. I think you'll get better results because those lights tend to be less yellow. It doesn't matter if you go with a 3500K or a 5000, as long as you're consistent with your color correction if you're using a Solux bulb. I know that people like John Paul Capernegro like to use the 3500K Solux bulb because it's closest to what his prints will be under in a gallery setting. So it's up to you as to what color you use. I will be using a 5000K fluorescent bulb. Another item that comes in handy when you're evaluating your color prints is a print viewing filter set. So this is an older Kodak that I bought new old stock. I believe Lee also made a kit, and you might be able to find one made by Tiffin. I don't know if they're still made. If not, you'll have to find a used set in good condition. But these are a set of filters in a variety of colors. They're your 6 major colors: blue, red, and green, and then your subtractive colors, magenta, yellow, and cyan. And they allow you to view in 3 different densities to find out what color cast is in your print, and then instructions on them on how to eliminate them. So we'll talk about that in more detail in part 2. And finally, before we look at how to actually process the prints, let's talk a moment about safe lights. Now, technically, you're supposed to print this in complete darkness. The color RA4 paper is sensitive to the entire spectrum. However, you can use very particular safe lights safely. I use a Thomas duplex safe light, and there are color printing filters for it. It is still a very bright light, so I need to make sure that I do a proper safe light test. I'll do another video a different day for testing your safe light for color, but basically it's the same process as black and white. There are also specialized LED lights made by companies such as Jobo and Duca, and then there are color printing filters from Kodak for traditional safe lights. There's the number 10 and the number 13. They are identical in color, but the 10 is much denser, making the room much more dim. So if you need to use a traditional safe light, I recommend you use a number 13 from Kodak. And then make sure you're using the appropriate wattage of bulb. Check with it. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it's a 7.5 watt incandescent bulb for direct illumination and 15 watt for indirect. So let's look at the 3 different methods that you can process the print. First, there is a roller transport processor. Now this is a large tabletop, sometimes floor standing machine. They come in a variety of sizes. I've seen them as small as 8x10 availability and as large as 60 inches wide. So you can usually get them on the used, well, you have to get them on the used market because they don't make them anymore. There might be one and maybe 2 brands still out there, but that's for large industrial size machines, not for home use. These machines are hard to find, they are difficult to maintain, and parts and service are no longer available for them. So if you use one, you will find that print quality is pretty consistent when run for a long time. If, however, you print every now and then, you'd probably be better served by draining it, washing it down, and then storing it in between, and then just gathering up all the negatives you want to print, making one large print run. That way you'll waste less of the chemistry and your prints will be more consistent. I don't have one of these machines. They are big, they're heavy, and they're expensive, so I've opted for something else. For printing RA4, the chemicals that you need, I recommend Kodak RA4-RT. So this is their roller transport system. It works really well at room temperature. Unlike film, we can correct for the color balance of the print at lower temperatures. So there are different times available for up into the 90, almost 100 degree Fahrenheit range. I believe it's in the 45 second to 1 minute developing time, but down below 80 degrees Fahrenheit, you can process at 2 minutes without any degradation. Now the color balance is different than at the higher temperatures, but you can make them match by careful filtration. So I recommend the RA-RT system. This is the developer. It's a 3 bottle system that you mix to make 10 liters of working solution, and then the blix, bleach and fix. There's 2 bottles of fix, 1 of bleach, that you mix together to make 10 liters of working solution of that. So aside from the roller transport machine, you can actually process your prints in open trays. Now the only reason why I don't do this is because even with good ventilation, I still find there to be too many fumes, and it makes breathing uncomfortable for me. So if that is a concern for you, I would recommend the last and final method I want to show. But otherwise, you can use open trays. So you have your developer up front, and you would process just like a black and white. Just put the paper in and agitate. Then, in order to avoid too much developer carryover into your blix, Kodak recommends in pamphlet J-39, I'll link to that in the description along with everything else, that you follow the developer with a acetic acid stop, so regular black and white stop, even indicator stop bath will be fine. Just 30 seconds in here, 30-second water rinse, and then your blix. At room temperature, it would be 2 minutes and 2 minutes with 30 seconds of the others. Then, if you find too much staining or uneven development, you can actually add a tray of plain water in front of the developer. This will extend your developing time slightly. They actually recommend in J39 from Kodak to increase your developer temperature by, I believe, 3 degrees Fahrenheit. However, you can use the same temperature and just extend your time slightly to compensate. After the blix, it's RC paper, so give it a good 5 to 10 minute running water wash. Dry it. It's very important to dry it, then evaluate. So open trays work perfectly fine, but I find that it just smells too much and gives me a little bit of lung irritation, even with my ventilation system on. So I don't use this particular method, but it does work just fine. I would recommend you consult that J39 document. It does go over how many prints you can make per liter of developer. I believe, and double check me on this, I believe 16 8x10 prints per liter of developer without having to extend developing time to compensate. And then the third and final method that I'll discuss for processing an RA4 print is a rotary drum. Now, you can use a machine such as a Jobo like this one here that will agitate as well as keep everything temperature controlled. They're easy to use, but they can be a bit expensive. But I actually don't like to use that machine for that. I find it a little too cumbersome for printmaking. I love it for film, but not for printmaking. Instead, I like to use just separate drums. You can get these from a variety of manufacturers. There's, of course, the Jobo brand drum you can use. This one is from Chromega or Sema. And then I think there's also Chrome, Besseler made some, and others. They come in sizes for 8x10, 11x14, 16x20, and 20x24. I've never seen larger. If I can find a 30x40 inch print drum, I'll probably grab it. But I may end up having to make my own for that size. And then to process the drums, you can simply roll them on the table. That's what these little guys are for, to allow rolling back and forth. Or you can use a motorized base. There are 2 kinds. This type from Uniroller that makes the drum spin one direction for a few revolutions and then it'll change back to the other direction, keeping the drum level. And then there's a type that I prefer, which is actually the Sema brand or Chromega brand, which rotates the drum continuously in one direction, but it rocks it back and forth as it does so. Therefore, the liquid moves side to side as well as allowing the print to go through it. Now, the advantage of drums over open trays is that you use very little chemistry per print. I believe this is 2 ounces per 8x10 print in this drum, and as little as 6 ounces in the 16x20. So that's pretty good economy. However, you cannot reuse it. There's too much oxidation occurring to reuse that. So let me show you quickly how these drums are used. So when I go to part 2, I will be using this system. However, I will not be showing how to use that system. I'll probably just edit through to make that video a little bit shorter in time. So let me show you how this is used here, and then you can apply that to your own printing. To use this system, I have the base up on a tray and leveled, and then my chemicals laid out. In the drum, you only need a pre-wet. It is important to use a pre-wet with a drum, the developer, and then the blix. You can use the stop, bath, and rinse with the drum if you find that you're getting unnecessary staining or uncontrollable staining. Otherwise, the 3 steps, and then you can wash the print separately in a tray of running water. Once you've exposed the print, you're going to place it in the drum. So you just kind of roll it up and it slides into the right spot. Place the lid on. Now it's light tight. You can turn the room lights on and do the rest in the light. The tray method that I showed a moment ago must be done in either complete darkness or with a color appropriate safe light that you have tested for the full length of exposure time to that safe light. I recommend you print or run the trays in complete darkness just to be sure. This, however, once the lid is on, you are light safe. Place it on the processor, pour in your water pre-wet, and then turn on the processor. This only needs to go for about 30 seconds, so begin your timer and let it run its course. When it's done, you can simply pour it out, let it drain for about 5 seconds, and then pour in your developer step, and immediately put it on the processor for another 2 minutes at room temperature. Once that is complete, you can discard the developer, let it drain for about 5 seconds. I recommend the final 5 seconds of your development time. Put in your blix solution and run for another 2 minutes. Once that is complete, you can remove the paper, well, drain the blix, remove the paper, you can get the lid off, and then move this to a tray of running water. Rinse out your drum, dry it completely before putting in the next print, and then you're ready to go. At this point, once this has been washed for 5, maybe 10 minutes in running water, then it's ready to dry with a hair dryer, and I can check the color balance. Now, the reason why we dry it before we check the balance is color paper tends to be very blue in color while wet. So its color will tone down and stabilize once it is fully dry. So using a hair dryer will just speed up the process. But that's all for a drum. It's very simple. Just load the paper in the darkness, put the lid on, pour in your water pre-wet, 30 seconds or so, dump that out, developer for 2 minutes, dump that out, blix for 2 minutes, dump that out, remove the paper, and wash. So pretty straightforward. That's the method that I am going to use when processing all the prints in part 2. So I will probably skip over this portion so that it's not overly repetitive for you. So I'll edit that out, but just for reference, this is how I process. I find it extremely repeatable and dependable. So you can find a drum rotator such as this on Craigslist, eBay, swap meets, but quite frankly, you can just roll it by hand. You can even use just wheels on a platform to just roll it, and then roll it at a steady rate. So that's what I'm going to use rather than my Jobo, and instead of open trays. You use the method that's best for you. And that should get you started. So remember, you're going to need color negative, color paper, an enlarger, preferably with a color head, but color filters will do. One of these 3 means of processing the print, and then a color viewing light and color viewing filters. Beyond that, it's fairly straightforward. Next time, we will look at the actual steps of making a print, including how to determine the correct exposure time and the correct color balance. And then step 3, we'll look at some more advanced techniques. So thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in part 2.